And we're live yet again with some PCS Impact Q&A. We've got an awesome episode for you today. Super excited. We've had these gentlemen on before, but in the meantime, I'm your host, MJ Boyce, the Director of Community Outreach at PCS Grades. Boom. With me, as always, is the lovely Megan Harless, our PCS Reform Advocate, and oh, by the way, resident BA censored for little ears in your room because we love you. Again, we've got this fantastic show today, and the reason it's fantastic is because it's a necessary topic. We've been hearing a lot, and I mean from hundreds of you who have said that you are facing unexpected personally procured moves / ditties, PPMs, whatever area you're from, that you are facing issues with, not being able to execute your moves when you need to because of this labor shortage. Does it exist? Does it? Depends on who you talk to, but we're going to get down to the nitty gritty to help solve some of those problems. We're going to talk about those unexpected changes and how to help navigate them a little bit and just let you know what's actually going on. But before we get to Megan's DoD updates and our awesome guests from the International Association of Movers, I'm going to go through those housekeeping items like I do every week. Ready, set, here we go. All right, folks, we've got the answers. If we don't have those answers, we know who does. And if we don't know either of those things, we're going to take your questions for action and get back to you with an answer. Speaking of questions, comments, concerns, suggestions, shout outs, go ahead and leave those in the comments section below and engage with us today. Let us know where you're watching from. Let us know who needs to see this. Everybody knows that somebody who's PCSing if you're not yourself. Let us know those questions, comments, concerns. Give us those shout outs because for every time you do this, you will have an entry to win some Hope Design Limited bling. Woot woot. So yeah, questions, comments, concerns, suggestions, shout outs, LOL smiley faces are awesome and highly encouraged, but do not count as an entry to win. Next up, we bring the experts to you. Experts like U.S. Transportation Command, experts like the International Association of Movers from the moving industry. We bring you military connected education experts and military spouse employment advocates. We bring all of these experts to you so that you can ask your questions in real time and get an answer. However, occasionally you're going to run into an issue that is specific to you and your military family. And in those specific instances, you will have two forever and always resources. Number one, your local chain of command. Number two, your local transportation office. Those are the people who know you. Those are the people who are dealing with your stuff. Those are the people who could take your issues and further them for action. Of course, you always have PCS grades at the helm. We've got reviews on and off base for housing. We've got area guides. You can review your movers. That's right. You can review your movers and schools and so much more. Whether you're looking to research your next duty station or you want to get a heads up and just see what the housing market's like out there, or maybe just, read a flavor article that we have about PCSing with kids. We've got your back at PCSgrades.com, but hold that thought and don't go there until after the webinar because we've got a great show for you today. Last but not least, and I'm modifying this every week, keep doing your part, people. Keep doing your part. We are flattening that curve. We've got to continue to flatten that curve because when we flatten that curve, we flatten Murphy with it. We're almost there. Murphy, do you hear us? We're this close and we're coming for you. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Megan for them DoD updates. Megan?
Hey, everybody. So just a couple of things like always. The first one, as soon as you get your orders, make sure you are getting onto DPS and setting up your move. Depending on your time frame, you may be in a severe crunch and may face some issues. If you're moving later in the summer, in the fall, you might be okay there. But as soon as you get your orders, get your move set up on DPS. The next thing is that, again, we love our fur babies. We love our pets. And it just got a little bit easier to move them if you are in the Army. The Army Emergency Relief, AER, has come out with their pet policy to allow some assistance for those pet transportation fees that are not reimbursed through other means with our PCS. So if you're PCSing with the Army, you can now go to AER to get, I believe it's a loan through them, a 0% interest loan that you can go to the AER to help with that pet shipping expense that you may have. The other service relief organizations, the Navy Marine Corps Relief Society, the Air Force Relief Society, they all have their own pet expense policy to kind of help as well, depending on your branch. Sometimes it's a loan, sometimes it's a grant, but if it's a loan, it's 0% interest. Sometimes they get converted to grants as well. So it all just depends on your needs, what you have. But Our service relief organizations are another great place where you can go as well to get some assistance with those unexpected expenses or those other non-reimbursable expenses that you may need for PCSing. So that's all I've got for now. I'll send it back to you, MJ.
Awesome, awesome. And just for the record, thank you so much for those DoD updates. For the record, people, Megan goes down that policy rabbit hole so that we don't have to. She helps us break down policies into bite-sized pieces for the peeps like me. All right, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our two favorite gentlemen who's, by the way, 3 times the charm. This is their 3rd time with us here because they are that awesome and they really bring the info. So I'm going to start off with Mr. Chuck White.
Hi, everyone. How are you? You guys, I'm tired already. There's just a little too much energy in this room. But thanks, MJ, and thanks, Megan, for having Dan and I on today. My goodness, as you indicated, there's just so much going on in the PCS world. We're going to try to bring you up to speed with some of our thoughts and ideas. Interestingly enough, we just got off of the phone an hour or so ago with U.S. Transportation Command, where it was, let me say, a lively discussion going on with U.S. Transcom staff, with all of the GIPSO personnel, the different services, military headquarters, and with industry. It got to be a knockdown, drag out a bit there. And some of the industry was standing on the side listening as some of the internal discussion got a little heated. So sometimes it's nice to have some of this deflected in other directions and not have everything aimed at the industry. So anyway, looking forward to today's discussion.
Awesome. And welcome, of course. And I'm going to tell you right now, man, that's a hard one to beat. We're laying it out bare here because we feel that the necessary information, whatever we can do to help you, whatever questions we can answer, we're going to do that because that's ultimately what is going to assist you in your PCS. So next up is our brother Dan here. Dan Bradley, would you mind?
Yeah, I'll introduce myself. Dan Bradley from the International Association of Movers as well. I'm the Director of Government and Military Relations. Have done 20 years as an Air Force logistics officer. I was involved in the personal property program back in the day. It's been a long time now. And then did some Department of the Army civilian time as well. So happy to be here. It's, I guess we're back 3 times because we didn't fail the first 2. So that's positive for us. But as Chuck said, there's a lot going on in the DoD side, but it's, in the moving world, it's not even just about the DoD side. The moving world is having struggles, in other government agencies, commercial, residential, you name it. And those struggles are no different than your local restaurant who can't get enough waiters and waitresses, and right on down the line, people are struggling in these kind of areas. So if you go to Target and they don't have your favorite cat food, some of these problems are all kind of linked in a strange way. So I'm looking forward to this session, and thanks for having me back.
Awesome. And that actually provides a huge piece of perspective because yes, I'm sure that at some point in our everyday lives, whether that's, missing our favorite brand of something, or maybe, not being able to get from A to Z, or not finding a mover for one reason or another, it's all interconnected in some way, shape, or form based on what is happening in our country at this moment. So let's dive in, because my first question is going to address something similar. So peak season 2021 kicked off officially May 15th. So we're about a month in, and it's been a challenging month, at least as it pertains to the hundreds of military families we've heard from thus far this peak PCS season. Compared to pre-COVID, okay, and last year with COVID, how is this year comparing to those two?
Well, I'll start out. It's difficult. What we are seeing is not the same kind of rebound in our labor forces that we had hoped to see. People were staying at home. We thought that as soon as the gates started open, the floodgates would come and labor would start coming out of the woodwork. Well, unfortunately, all of our data shows that we're about 75% of the same capacity we had year over year. We think that there are a lot of reasons for that. Some of that has to do with some of the federal government support programs that are out there financially that, we're seeing that for some people at certain levels, they can make more money staying at home than they can coming back to work. And so it's been very, very difficult. The other thing that we're seeing is, again, DOD has opened up the floodgates last year. They were really monitoring. This is US Transcom and those in the 4 community that are dealing with household goods. They were really monitoring the number of moves that were happening on a weekly basis because they understood we were in a pandemic environment. We were in an environment that there were some restraints in place in terms of movement of personnel. And so there was really strict guidelines about the number of people that were moving per week. We talked about it a lot, and we talked a lot about with the personnel community. And it seems that some of that has kind of fallen by the wayside. There's some pent up demand in folks that chose not to move during the pandemic. So now those kind of the restraints are off, and we've got the normal PCS rotations that are happening right now. Schools being let out, both regular schools for your kids, but schools for the military as well, military personnel. And it's, lack of labor and all these other factors. It's a perfect storm right now. And we are really having some difficulties meeting the demands that are being placed on our industry by DOD.
Well, and just a quick follow-up. I have a question about, you
Sure.
said 75% of capacity.
Yep.
So you're operating at 75% capacity, meaning that out of all of the moves, you are able to physically support-ish 75% based on the personnel and everything that you have right now, right?
I'll say we can do maybe a little bit more because we've got a lot of great professional individuals, and they are able to rob Peter or pay Paul to be able to handle more of the moves. But we're crying uncle right now, and in this discussion I was talking about earlier with Transcom, they're still trying to meet the needs of customers that are calling, I need to move tomorrow kind of thing. People need, if anything comes out of today's conversation, if there's any way that you can push your PCS to the right, maybe the one spouse that's in the military can go ahead and move, and maybe the spouse can stay behind because you're not getting moved in June. It's just almost 100%. You're not getting moved in June if you have not already booked your move. Probably you ought to be thinking right now, if you haven't booked it, late July into August, because this next month is going to be constrained, and that's a nice way of saying it.
Wow.
Yeah, and I would say, we have these calls with US Transcom and the GIPSOs and the services every year. In the peak season, it becomes once a week. We actually have 2 a week now, based on what we call the conditions-based movement call that was really COVID related coming out of 2020, and that call has remained as well. But on the peak season calls, the tension levels start rising typically on those calls because of constrained capacity and things like that. As we get into this time of year, coming into the beginning of July, end of June, it might even be a little early right now from what we're used to, but that same kind of level of frustration and tension, we were getting those calls in peak season calls in May, in middle of May. So things are already ramping up to be stressful and constrained in May. And we were having the same kind of May conversations that we typically weren't having until 4th of July timeframe, and those kind of timeframes. And it's, as Chuck said, we hear from agents who will say, hey, I used to have 33 people to put on my crews last year. I got 15 this year. I got 19. It's amount, the capacity issue associated with personnel is real. And it's probably the driving factor, but that capacity, leads into people driving the trucks to move your stuff. And that leads down to even freight drivers who in the past have come and helped pick up household goods and move it, even if they didn't pack it and unpack it and things like that, we use that kind of capacity. Everything's constrained everywhere along the line, and that's causing problems, whether that's how much freight you can put on rail on those types of movements when it happens, because some of your household goods will get on rail depending on the type of shipment, and that's backed up and crowded. Coming through the ports internationally, that's backed up. There's just all kinds of things happening that are having impacts. But you asked about the previous years in comparison. 2019 was I would say a decent year. I think statistics kind of show that from and you can only take so much from customer satisfaction surveys in the program, but those were better. And last year they were even better. They climbed a little higher. And I think a lot of people industry-wise would say it's because the shipments were metered out a little bit more, specifically, and things were planned to be spread out longer during the summer, and that gave every individual shipment more opportunity to have people's eyes on it and pay attention to it and get it serviced the way it should. And I think the DoD tries to do that again this year. They heard the issue from previous years, and they saw it maybe did have some improvement last year with some of those issues. But people want to move. People have changes of command. People have houses that they have to get out of. People have new assignments and training, and so it just kind of creates its own issue. But as Chuck said, on the commercial side, even we had people on the call today saying, "Hey, our on the commercial side, people are blacking out their moves all the way till into August. So if the commercial capacity is not there either, it's constrained, and they are starting to say you can't move until August." And the point being made, I think, was if the DoD doesn't start acknowledging that maybe you're not going to get moved till August, then that capacity might get moved up by the commercial guys who are telling their customers already you're not going to get moved to August, and they're already booking those shipments into August. So it just becomes something that continues to constrain capacity throughout the rest of the summer.
So a quick follow-up to that, to something that you said, because I've seen some conversations happening here and there with industry and with Transcom. You talked about you having those types of peak season calls in May this year instead of June, where they typically happen at. Do we think that peak season is just earlier this year because of everything, or are we still going to peak season expanding into July? That it's just a bigger concern, bigger issue because there's more people moving, or did peak season shift left and just happen earlier?
I think it's a waterfall. It's a domino effect. Yeah, I do think it started, the concerns with peak season started earlier. I think it is directly related to the dominoes for pandemic, government funding to help relief programs, and then this backlog of shipments and the demand being so great and all the other constraints. So I'd say it was earlier, and it's going to end up being later. Where we have typically seen, and I've been in the business for about 27 years, I think now, since I started in this business, either as a mover or in the association world. And we used to think of peak season when I first got started as in mid-May till August. That was kind of peak season. And it's continued to be constrained. And now we have this kind of peak of the peak thing where everybody wants to move, say, last week of May, first week in June, and it kind of ends around 4th of July timeframe. It's really been narrowed and constrained. This year, I think we're going back to old school. We're going back to, we really got started pretty heavy in May again, and I think we are going to see the same kinds of problems as we get into late July into August. Okay. Interestingly enough, on that call we talked about with U.S. Transportation Command, some of those guys that were in uniform and are now DoD civilians working at the GIPSOs, who have been around this probably about the same length of time that I have, were saying things like the worst peak season I've ever seen in terms of capacity. I think some of the quality is still there. Everybody's going to have a problem at some point. But I think the quality movers are there. They just don't have enough people, enough trained people to be able to service the kind of demand that we have out there right now.
Yeah. So that leads into my next question then. We have this labor shortage. How is this impacting the industry's ability to service shipments then?
That's what we're saying. I mean, it is very, very difficult. Dan kind of laid out for you where I had, it's not the trucks per se. I think the same number of trucks are sitting on lots. It's the number of people I've got to get into those trucks and service. So where I'm an agency in, I don't know, San Antonio, and I was able to put 15 trucks on the road to be able to go out and service members on a particular day. Now I might have 12. Now I might have 11. And so again, those 3 or 4 less shipments a day across the country for all of the service providers is causing this backload where people are having problems.
And I just had an agent, point out one thing to me too, which again, when we start talking about how it's all interconnected in a way, right? So his point was, people on the call we were just on are frustrated about what they call turnbacks, right? Like, as far as you knew as a customer, you were ready to go and you were going to start, packing up tomorrow kind of thing. And then you're being told today, nope, nobody's here for you. I can't make it. His point was that the labor shortage isn't just a moving industry labor shortage, it's everywhere. So when he had a truck that he had put against a move that was happening tomorrow, and that truck broke down for whatever reason along the side of the road, guess who also doesn't have labor? Truck mechanics, right? Tow truck operations, things like that. So where he was getting that truck fixed in the past and it was getting back and maybe it was a couple hours late or a day late, but it wasn't going to be days and days late. Now they get put in a queue to get their truck fixed as well, right? So the recovery mechanisms that the industry has had in the past with finding other manpower, finding another driver, finding another truck, all of those things to try and save a move that where you had everything you had planned and you thought it was good to go, those saves are getting harder and harder because of the impact all down the line with labor and parts and everything else that goes on. Because again, transportation is not just limited from the perspective of transportation in our industry, transportation of getting something from Amazon or my sister-in-law right now is waiting on a shipment of dog food. And it's a month late right now, right? So those are the kind of things that are happening everywhere. And that goes to truck parts and that goes to, anything else you might imagine. So.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say like the dog food part. Like I've heard like my auntie actually, she ordered cat food like 2 months ago. Usually gets there in a week, 2 weeks. Yeah. Couple months, man.
Yeah.
Months.
My wife asked me, we've got 2 cats. My wife asks me every day, what the heck is going on at the grocery store? I can't find the cat food that I want. And our cats are finicky and they only, and I'm saying, you need to understand. I sent her to my website because IAM has done a white paper and a video about what we're calling the supply chain crisis. And it all started with how everything got slowed down, pent up, no movement at the peak and the beginning of the pandemic. And then all of a sudden, this month's backup still has not cleared. And so all the pictures that we show on this video show Los Angeles, the city, Long Beach and LA ports. That's the largest port group in the United States. And then up the coast to Oakland, huge ports with 30 ships just sitting out in the ocean waiting to get in because the ports are so congested. Then once the containers with those goods get off the ship, then they're having problems getting drivers in to get the containers. Dan talked about the rail problems. All of the railroads are backed up as well. So the idea of getting things to where they need to be in a nice, easy, streamlined fashion, holy cow, it is a nightmare out there right now.
And
totally. And Meow Mix doesn't work for everybody.
And if you like to read logistics news, last Friday, FedEx told 1,400 customers, and a lot of those are corporate warehouse type customers, that by Monday, so on Friday, they told 1,400 that on Monday they would no longer service their shipment needs. So, that, again, it's impactful everywhere.
I hope one of those is not Amazon, because I really need my subscribe and save dog food and cat food to show up once we like it does.
Well, you can tell we're all animal lovers on this show.
All about the fur babies, peeps.
Yes.
That's awesome.
So I'm going to get to a couple of viewer questions, but I did want to put up, because this was a really, we try to keep up with the trends. We try to get with the experts as things are happening in real time to potentially mitigate issues, or at least be aware of them, so you can on the back end do what you can do to avoid them. But I just had a little shout out. Sorry, it's covering you guys up. Little shout out from Angela. Shout out, Angela. Thank you for discussing this hot topic for PCS season. We had 3 neighbors get notified this week that they will not be assigned movers and will need to do a PPM. We had already decided to do a PPM this year, and we appreciate all you do to keep us informed. So thank you, Angela.
Let me make a real quick comment on that.
Yeah.
You also need to understand, if you're planning a PPM, you better be booking that as incredibly early, because if you're planning on going out and hiring a mover, number one, you need to be careful with who you're hiring. But yeah, those are the same people that are booked up doing everything else as well. And hey, it's not like I walk down to the local U-Haul and say, I need a truck this weekend. Boom. I mean, it could be you better be reserving these things a month or more in advance, because everybody is moving at this point. We're seeing so there's a new term in our industry, and it's called delocation. Not relocation, delocation. And what's happening is everybody has found out, hey, I don't have to live real close to my work because we're doing a ton of remote work. So there are tons of people that are moving away from those high density areas, those high cost areas. They're moving out to lower cost housing out in remote area. I tell you, the mass exodus out of California is incredible right now. And so if you want to plan a PPM, if you want to get a truck, however, if you want a pod or from pods or one of those other kinds of entities, you better be booking this thing as early as you can. You just think, oh, I'm doing it myself, I don't have to worry about it. I call bull.
He said it. He said it out loud. It happened. Hashtag it.
So really, why we're on the topic of PPMs, I wanted to get this question asked too. So a lot of folks are doing PPMs this year for either they already decided to do it, or they're being kind of pushed into it because they need to leave their home by a certain date and make it to somewhere else. A lot of families, every year we hear of at least a couple that kind of get swindled with some rogue movers that happen. So what are some red flags that families can look for when they're trying to choose a moving company, whether it's a full service moving company or just a pack or load or whatever it may be? What are some red flags families can look for to ensure that they're getting a good, reputable mover?
Well, I mean, one of the very first things that I would tell people to do is go to the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration's website. That is the federal agency that licenses movers that are doing interstate transportation. So if you're doing an interstate move, if you're doing an interstate move, that'd be the first place I go, because it's easy to find the list of folks that are properly licensed, that are properly insured. You can look at their safety records at this fmcsa.gov website and do the search on Protect Your Move. And thank you very much.
Brian's shout out is, do you know Brian?
Brian's on my staff. He's my vice president. Yep.
Way to go, Brian. Thank you so much. You beat our social media person to this, man. Awesome. So right there, people, what he's talking about, go to that.
There you go. So I'd ask people to that'd be the first level of due diligence, because any of these rogues, I call them criminals. They're not rogue movers. They're not movers. They're criminals. And they are looking to get your shipment, hold it hostage, and charge you then more money to be able to get your shipment back. So make sure that people are licensed. And it's not simply just going on Google and doing a Google search and you think, oh, they've got a website. And they're different levels. So there are many, what we find in the industry, on the commercial side, there are what are called brokers. Brokers are not movers. They will take your move, they'll take your money, and then they hand you off to a mover, and that mover may not be a licensed mover. So you need to just do some due diligence. And one of the things you can do is you can go to, Brian will jump on this again, I think. You can go to our website, www.iamovers.org. And we have a link to what we call Mobility Exchange. That's our directory. And we do a validation process for our members. And you'll be able to find appropriately licensed, insured, validated movers on that website that you can then say, okay, at least there has been some vetting done on this company to ensure that they're okay.
Yeah, and what I would say about our website is it's that mobility exchange area is effective and it's got a lot of great information, but you kind of have to know what you're looking at too. So that could take some hand-holding on something like that. But it's something that we're working towards on a customer-facing site as well, so that in the future you would be able to go to our site and kind of wander through that page a little easier and kind of see who is what we call a trusted mover and has that designation. So I think that'll be great, but it's a couple months away from. It's not going to help us this peak season. As far as red flags too, I would almost say, I'm not saying this is exactly what would happen, but I would, if you call in PPM, you call a local moving company, or you not a local moving company, if you call a moving company and they say, yeah, we'll take care of that right away, there might be a question for you to just dig a little deeper. How are you going to take care of that right away? Who's going to move my stuff? Do you really have capacity? Because all we're hearing is that there is no capacity. So somebody who's eager to help you and needs some money up front and eager to help you, you might want to ask a lot of hard questions to. And as Chuck said, do some research on the It's Your Move portion of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration website and make sure they're legitimate.
Yeah, I mean, it's like going to a restaurant. If you go to one restaurant and there's not a line at the door and it's wide open on the inside, you go next door and there's a line, 20 people hanging out the door, that gives you an indication, I think, of the quality of the food that's in there. And I think that's, goes in our industry as well.
Yeah,
for sure.
A really quick follow-up as we talk about PPMs, we talk about standard moving companies, the full service moving companies, the pods, container type of companies, but I've heard of some folks also reaching out and using like freight forwarders, freight carriers that would come and also drop like a container of some sort or a truck and load up. So what is there a difference between using somebody going and hiring Bob's storage and moving company down the road versus Bob's freight forwarding down the road? How do those compare?
Yes. Some of that's a little different, I think, than maybe the way if you're talking about someone showing up and dropping a container or a trailer at your house. I mean, there are some very reputable companies, Yellow Freight, ABF Freight, that does that. But this is, again, something that they will drop off there. You're going to have to load it yourself, do all of the work yourself, and then they'll come and bring a truck and pick it up and take it to the destination and drop it back at your house. That's exactly the same thing that a Pods or a Pack Rat or a couple of the name brands that are out there that do that kind of thing. Then there is what's called a freight forwarder. A freight forwarder is a company that, so there's brokers, there's freight forwarders, and there's actual motor carriers. Motor carriers have trucks and men and warehouses. You've got freight forwarders that arrange moves, but they take on the liability. So they're kind of a single point of contact that helps you arrange all the aspects of your move. That's what an international company does. They typically are located here in the U.S., but they have the ability to have arrangements and contracts with companies that are overseas. So they mesh that together. A broker does not have any liability at all. They take your move, they take your money, they hand it off to somebody, and they wipe their hands of it. So 3 different types, all of them, they can all get licensed. There's broker licenses through the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, freight forwarder licenses, motor carrier licenses, but that's just the first step. And then you've got to do your due diligence even beyond that.
Okay, so I want to talk about that vetting process. I kind of want to go back to that because we need to vet our movers, just so we don't end up with a situation, which we've heard that horror story, just like everybody else, where they pack your stuff up because you found them on your own and there was a really great deal, right? And then they get that stuff on their truck and then they say, you know what? We recalculated. Yeah, we recalculated. And, if you want your stuff, you're going to have to pay us an extra $2,000 or we can't give it to you. Yeah. And so many people have. So just the other day, I wanted to let you guys know, and Megan, I probably should let you know this because I gave all of you shout outs. I was on a Facebook Live with Millspouse Fest to an audience of, all of their people. And this is what we were kind of talking about. We were talking about this season. We were talking about the unexpected PPMs, and their director of operations, Julie, shout out at Millspouse Fest. She asked the question that she had received from audience members herself, which was, what are families supposed to do, especially those coming back from Oconus, and then there's no moves and this, that, and the other, like, what are they supposed to do? I did several things. Of course, I did say PCS grades. If you're wanting to look and research, you have to vet your movers. You have to. So you can look at reviews for your movers in different areas on PCSgrades.com. But I also gave that shout out to IAM because you're going to know not only what those red flags are, what to watch for, what is a no different than those, hey, what to watch out for in a phishing email, right? Same difference. It's that on the IAM site, which we did drop the link. Every link we discussed, people, is going to be dropped in the comments if it hasn't been already, but I'm pretty sure your boy Brian's on it. Just saying. But also, and I gave Megan a shout out too, because one of the things that Megan and I had discussed, and this might be more on the policy side of things, because I am seeing some questions in here about something like this. So Megan, we discussed previously offline as we were prepping for this about, facing those unexpected personally procured moves, PPM/Diddy, and possibly due to a little known rule, possibly getting reimbursed at 100% of the actual cost. Can you really quick explain to our audience what that is and why it matters?
Yeah, so first, the actual cost reimbursement has to be approved beforehand by your transportation office to know what is going on. I'm not sure about all of the services. I know the Navy so far this year has only approved 9 of those. But right now with the PPM, we are paid, the incentive pay is at 100% of the government's constructive cost of what they would pay a moving company to move your same shipment, the weight and distance that you are moving it. If for some reason you have to go into you're kind of forced into a PPM, like to go Oconus or some extreme situation, you can file for an actual cost reimbursement. So if that government constructive cost piece is $5,000, but it takes you $10,000 to get your stuff from Washington State to Germany, you could be approved for actual cost reimbursement for that full $10,000. That way you're at least not out of pocket on any of those moving expenses.
And so that application, sorry, go ahead.
Real quick. I got to give a shout out to Megan. It has been through Megan's efforts, that middle category where you do a PPM and you get that constructive cost back at 100%. That used to be at a lower rate. It used to be 90, 95%. And it's been through Megan's efforts that the ears have opened up and they now allow a full 100% cost reimbursement. So, everybody ought to be giving kudos to Megan on that front.
Which means everybody who's watching from their phone or even online, go ahead and hit that love button and let me see them fly, because I'm watching on you guys let it fly for Megan. Let all the love and likes and reactions and hugs fly. No, and that's
I noticed you didn't say that for us. You weren't giving us that love.
It's It's not over till it's over, bro.
Okay.
I thought you were going to tell everybody to go and give that 5% to Megan. I thought you had a vendor.
Look at that, people. Look at it go. Look at it go. See, it's going. Woo, see, in real time. Number love. Okay, so this kind of goes in a little bit with what we were just talking about, because we've got a lot of interesting and specific questions from our audience, which honestly are the questions we've been receiving for a few weeks now. I would like to actually hit up, let's see first, Dustin. Shout out, Dustin. Dustin says, how will this affect like overseas moves that are happening? Since most have to wait for those hard orders, right, in order to schedule our moves, and sometimes they're last minute. So how is that impacting those of us, especially those of us moving overseas?
I even say it's a double effect. I know what Dan's going to say. So it's the same people that are doing a domestic or an international move for military families, and so. Unfortunately, even if your orders are last minute and you need to get out of Dodge, you're going to face those same problems that we were talking about getting a company to handle your move. It is probably going to be delayed. So you're going to have to be talking about that ordering entity and say, look, I can't get moved. You're going to have to delay my time that I'm supposed to arrive, or the military person is going to have to go and leave behind the spouse to be able to handle the moving responsibilities when they can get covered. The other thing we haven't really talked about, but as a result of this supply chain crisis we've talked about, there's a real wood problem. And all of those international moves for DoD are put into large wooden containers. Well, the cost of wood has gone up to 250%. And what? DoD has instances where we used to be able to get what we call lift vans, those wooden boxes that show up and your goods go into it, where we used to pay last year $150, $160. Those things are over $400 a piece now. And not only that, you can't get them. We now are ordering things that won't come for 6 weeks or so. So there are real problems in what we're talked about as Code 2. Those are domestic crated shipments, and Code 4, which are the international crated shipments. Real problems with getting the containers to be able to put those together. Another constraint on the capacity.
So does that mean like Please, I am smart, people. I want you to understand this, but I need clarification. So does that mean like, okay, used to cost like what, 150, and now it's like $400 for these, these like crate, right? The wood for this crate. Does that mean that moving company who's moving us is having to pay that, but is not getting that back from the service?
Great question. I'll let Dan talk about that. I'm running my mouth too much.
That was a problem for a little while, and it started causing people not to order wood crates, right? And frankly, it wasn't just wood crates; it was packing materials and the paper that they wrap your stuff in, and all those kind of things. Wood products as a whole, right? Special crating that you might have wanted. But we worked Transcom. We kind of sent a note to Transcom on that whole issue that was occurring, and told them that this was going to become problematic as time went on. They responded to us, put together a small working group with IAM and a couple other carriers, and they have offered surcharges now to the industry to help account for some of that cost, and they do that by per hundredweight, but it's kind of not relevant. But by the shipment, so they're trying to help out with creating costs and with those lift vans that Chuck talked about and some of the wood packing material type stuff that people are having trouble getting their hands on. So they have done that because those prices have skyrocketed and have gone crazy. Historic levels, of course, like everything else is historic right now. And the problem is there in 2019, the demand for wood went down. People closed a lot of mills in Canada and other places in the world. And, obviously people went to find other jobs. There's all kinds of stuff going on here. So beyond the distribution, the availability of wood became problematic as it wasn't that profitable a couple of years ago. And so a lot of people stopped producing those type of wood products. And so trying to turn that back on is a big People are trying to start reestablishing some of those mills and getting people to come back and work in some of those mills. And then we've had people tell us that they had an entire shipload of wood heading to the United States that had to get stopped in the Bahamas and sat there for weeks on end. And again, then ships sitting at anchor, not being able to be downloaded, that had wood products on it. We were told on one call from a supplier that they had these lift fans that Chuck talks about, 250 lift fans that they put out for sale to let everybody know in the moving industry, and they were gone in 10 minutes, right? So then they had nothing else. They didn't have anything else to offer anybody else. So, we hear people tell us that even the pads, the blankets that they try and order, that they're being told it's 8 weeks to get those blankets. They're being told it's 8 weeks to get some of their paper. And like Chuck said, the crates are out there as well. So all of those things are having an impact.
So I feel like I need to take my wooden shed and my privacy fence and start auctioning it for some lift fans to help y'all out a little bit. I mean, highest bidder. I've got a good sized privacy fence back there that can make a really great crate.
You've seen the memes out there that show a truck with a couple of pieces of wood in the back, and they're going to trade that for a car right now, because that's the way. I mean, if anybody's been to your local Home Depot and tried to go in and buy wood for whatever project, you're walking out going, "Oh my God, that's way more than I ever thought I was going to have to pay for that kind of stuff."
What's really interesting, and I'm going to say this just because it makes sense now. So my husband doesn't know this, but he's watching. Shout out, Boo. I have been known on occasion to look behind Walmart to see if there are any pallets. Just, how they toss the pallets out, right? Okay, because, you can like lift a garden and you can do stuff with it, right? They're not there.
There's my cat, by the way. There's the cat.
You got double the
This is bad kitty. So bad.
We like bad kitties. Love it. You're welcome for that comic relief. We can all thank Chuck and his baby kitties for that.
So I want to throw up this question here from Jonathan while we discuss all the issues that are happening this year. Do we expect this to happen again in 2022, or do we think things are going to level out a little bit more then? Have we some lessons learned to try to prevent it next year?
Well, great question. I mean, it's really kind of, it has multiple levels to it. Do I think that we are going to get better in 2022? Yes, I do. I think we will be over some of the pandemic headache and hangover, and I think labor will start to come back in 2022. But I will tell you, we're still going to be dealing with the global household goods contract that's set to be awarded this fall. And right now, the timeline for implementation is October of 2022. If all that holds out, it is a very, very questionable environment for moving companies and what roles they're going to play as we transition from where we are now to that future program. And so I can tell you, there's a lot of discussion going on within the industry and a lot of trepidation. We understand what the current paradigm we're working in is like. We're not sure what role people will play in the future one. So, I think that we'll get better in 2022 as things start to stabilize in the supply chain, in the labor markets, et cetera. But there's still going to be this big question mark hanging over our industry. How will the new global household good contract affect us and each of the different roles that people are playing in the supply chain?
So actually, let's look a little sooner than 2022. Let's look to October, November. So Angela Atwood, shout out Angela. I'll put it up on the screen for a second, but it's going to cover everybody up. So I'm just going to read it out loud and then live and then living color. So with people who were supposed to PCS last year, who are now PCSing this year, with those due to PCS this year, will it still be less busy, quote unquote, coming October to November? To sum up, Hubby will be switching branches around that time. We will be PCSing around that time too. And I'm worried that because of COVID last year, it will still be crazy come this fall. So October, November timeframe, what are we thinking?
I think probably busier than normal, although we were busier last year in that kind of October world, I think, because of trying to catch up from COVID and the stop movement. So my guess is that it probably will be a little bit busier than normal. I don't know if it's an impact that causes a lot of problems necessarily yet, but busier. And the DoD, we talk about people who were supposed to move last year and didn't, and maybe those are out there. But on the calls we've been on, people have said that the DoD moved who they needed to move last year. They spread it out farther, but they moved who they needed to move, and that there weren't all these kind of latent requirements for movement. I'm not 100% sure that that's 100% correct, but it is what we said, that at the transportation level, the transportation staffs in the services have said, hey, we process what needed to be processed for moves. We did that. So whether the personnelists who cut the orders held back, I'm not 100% sure, but from the DoD's perspective of the people that talked to us, they didn't have a lot of extra moves that they needed to do. We do know that there was probably, Chuck, 30 to 40,000 less moves last year than there were in previous years. So to me, that sounds like a latent requirement for, a buildup of requirements. But, right now we're kind of tracking along on previous years, kind of pre-pandemic years, as far as the numbers of people that are moving. So it's not like we're getting rushed on right now and beyond what was typical in pre-COVID years.
Word.
Yeah, we're having about thank you. We're moving about 10,000 people a week at this point right now, and we kind of settled on a sweet spot of 9,000 during the peak season, and we were at, or maybe even a little below that, for a longer period of time after the stop move order was lifted last year. It kind of relates to that same thing. Is there any latency? Is there any backlog that's waiting? I thought that there would be. I think that has had effect. We are being told, as Dan said, that no, that's not the case. But we're back over where the targets were, and we're doing it at 75% of the workforce that we had last year. So that, again, it's a domino effect, and we've talked about all of the other variables that are out there. And so, again, it's a difficult peak season for us, for everyone.
And you know what? Honestly, that is exactly the theme that we're hearing, because just in general, as if Murphy's no longer preoccupied with the COVID aspect of things. So now he's going to get all up in our business on several different fronts.
That's right.
So not only do we have this really hot market with really low inventory of homes once you PCS from one place to another, so there's that thing, you also have this labor shortage and other aspects of what is happening right now impacting our moves and the labor force and those who are able to move us and having to do a PPM versus a regular military move. There was a question from Monica, and I'm not sure. We may have to get back with you on this one, Monica. But I'm going to see if you gentlemen can help take it. Monica asks, how does the decline in moving companies' capacity and the DoD budget cuts impact a PCS move this year? Is it a factor at all?
I'll take a little bit of that, and I'll let Dan, as a former uniform guy, talk about this. But the budgets have already been set in previous years for this. We're talking about, I believe what Monica's talking about, are future budgets and how they will be affected starting in the next fiscal year. So for this year, it's not going to have an effect. And I don't think the budget cuts are really going to affect the PCS budgets, though I guess that remains to be seen, as there is some flexibility in those budgets and how they are allocated and where they're allocated to. So I would say nominal effect, nothing this year, but in the future, there may be some nominal effects budget-wise.
Gotcha. Dan, give it to us. Give it to us, brother.
Yeah. Well, what I would say is what I've seen in the past is, declining budgets lead to policy changes that the services try to implement to say, hey, if you're in CONUS, you're going to stay there at least 3 years, right? And if you're a brand new second lieutenant in the Air Force, then we're not going to move you to a new duty station. We're going to move you to a new job and things like that, right? So those are things that have been tried in the past to limit people at certain ranks, certain grades, certain jobs from staying someplace a little bit longer. And they try and do that, I think, to help try and curtail the requirement for moves so that they can manage it within their budgets. We asked for surcharge for things like wood packing, and that money's got to come from someplace, right? That goes back to the services budgets, and they have to choose something else that doesn't get paid to pay for stuff like that, right? So, but I don't think it's having an impact on the ability to PCS. I think, personnel policy would kind of take that over and try and find ways to mitigate some of the pressure of, whether or not we want to cut down moves by 10,000, 20,000, 50,000, whatever. I do recall one time though, when I was in the program where the Navy just got to a point and they just said, we're not PCS and anybody else this year. Like, the budget ran out in September, and they just said, we're on a hold now until the new budget's approved in the fiscal year. And so, September moves for the Navy kind of dropped off. That's been years ago. But
was that about the 13 timeline, 2013-ish?
I'm not 100. I'd be remiss if I even tried to guess.
You blocked that part out. Really quick before Megan, because Megan's going to put up a really good question. I just need to give us, I'm sorry, I got to give fam the love. My Auntie Chris from Michigan, who is not a military spouse, but she owns me. I'm her niece. So shout out Auntie Chris for supporting our military community and watching us today. But yeah, Megan, go for it.
Yeah, so we've got a question here from Courtney. Are you allowed to even pick your moving company if the military is moving you? And the answer is yes-ish. So you get to, when you set up your move in DPS, it does ask you for a preferred TSP, a non-preferred TSP. This is just a request, but they do try to, if you have a preference, to see if that company has capacity to take your move. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it does not. It's a yes-ish kind of answer, not real solid there. But
so where can we make it solid? How can we make it solid? Who do we talk to? What do we ask?
So you can always talk to your local transportation office. The key is that if that company does not have capacity, if they are already completely full for that location of where you're moving to or from, then unfortunately you may not be able to get them. It's all going to come down to what capacity that company has. But if you have a company that you really want to use, talk with your transportation office and let them know that you really want to be booked under this company, and they can see what they can do to try to make that happen for you. So that's that. And I wanted to ask to you, both of you, Dan and Chuck, we've talked today about a lot of issues, a lot of things that are impacting this year and causing a lot of concern for everybody on all sides of the moving process. With what we are seeing this year, what, in your opinion, in a perfect world, if you could make the request to fix these issues and make things better, what would your suggestions or requests for fixing this year be?
For me, well, there's multiple things, but for me, the two things would be I'd like to wave my magic wand and find more qualified labor to make available for moving companies. That's going to solve a ton of ills. And, maybe we'll see some of that come about as states are now starting to say no. They want workers to come back. They don't want to keep supplementing people's incomes with aid, and the federal aid that's available goes away in August. So we'll see where that goes. The other thing is, if I could wave that magic wand, I'd get with the one community, the personnel guys, and say, look, we need to do this thing. You're not cutting orders when we've reached what we think have been determined as our peak numbers, around 9,000 moves a week. And so with the transportation, the 4 community and the 1 community talking more, we can try to provide an environment where we move a good number of people, but those are those people are getting the best possible experience, and we'll keep trying to squeeze, 5 pounds or 10 pounds into that 5-pound bag. That's when problems start to occur. And so realization of that on the government side, and a little bit more on that labor piece on the industry side, and I think we're heading in the right direction.
Yeah, I would just say, and Chuck's thrown out the number 9,000 a few times, and trying to stay at that level. I think it's lower than that, frankly. I think when we were asked our opinion on this a couple years ago, when I had just gotten to the association, and what we had seen is over 2 years when I was there, once moves started going over 8,000 per week, that's when the gypso started becoming more shrill as far as the frustration of, hey, the transportation service providers, the moving companies, they didn't show up, or they turned back a shipment, or those kind of things. And so we had put that out last year. 8,000 was more of a magical number, and Transcom chose the 9,000 number to kind of try and stay below for the peak season because of COVID. And I think frankly, with less labor now, that 8,000 number is probably even more realistic, and maybe even lower than that, frankly. So I mean, the one thing to me is all related to that, and that's what a lot of moving industry called for today on today's call with Transcom and the services is you gotta push these moves to the right. You gotta move a more consistent number over a larger number of months and move it to the right, and try and allow people to manage the shipments that they have. And then on the industry side, what I would say is, and I think a lot of people do this well, again, it's easy to find 100 examples or 200 examples, and that's 200 people. So that's not what we want. We don't want to just kick 200 people to the curb and say, oh, you didn't get communicated well with, and so sorry. But hey, we took care of 8,800 people well, right? Or something like that. So I get that, right? I don't want people to think I'm saying that everyone doesn't deserve a perfect move, because that's what they deserve. Nobody's going to get a perfect move, but again, that's kind of what everybody's shooting for. But communication, right, on the industry side is the one thing that we hear a lot about. What you don't want is somebody standing in their front door waiting for somebody to show up, and then nobody ever contacted them to let them show up. So the one, and again, that doesn't fix your move necessarily, but at least it puts you in communication and helps on your expectations. So if as an industry, we get better, not in just a lot of cases or even majority cases, but in all cases of improving communication, I think that would go a long way. And again, the less people you have to communicate with, the better you are to communicate with the people that you do have, right? So it all comes back to, are we trying to move too many at one time, and putting that 10 pounds of stuff in a 5-pound sack? So.
Yeah, that's a great comment. If I could, real quickly, people don't understand. This is inside the DoD and outside, just how many people the Department of Defense moves. If you are a mover and you're part of one of the largest accounts that you can think of, somebody like Amazon or Marriott, and they probably move 4,000-5,000 people a year. You're talking about moving that many people and more in a week during the peak season for the Department of Defense. This is a market unto itself. It's DoD and then the rest of the world. It's crazy. So the concept of moving this many people at the same time, and then, oh, by the way, we've got to be able to service all the other types of customers we have. DoD is the giant elephant in the room, and they control and can make determinations about how the entire industry worldwide is actually operating. So
you're absolutely right. And I remember you telling me our first go round, because this is our third people, the military move, like we move for the military, the DoD, 350 to 400,000 moves per year, right? Like, holy cow, that's the number. And then, tack on some of the things like the averages there's no such thing as an average right now. We're reestablishing that whole thing in the moving industry, right? We're fixing that. We're recalibrating. But I really love what everybody on here right now just talked about. We talked about communication. We bring experts like you guys on. We have Megan on here. I am here on behalf of PCS Grades, which is another resource. We bring all of the information collectively to our people because if they don't have that communication, if they don't have that information, you don't know what you don't know, and you cannot execute your move if you properly or effectively, or let's just get it out there, smoothly, without the information. You can take the information and do what you will with it. It's not always going to be happy information. It's not always going to be great information. It's not going to be the most awesome thing in the world, but it will give you the opportunity to go left or right based on what you know, correct? That doesn't just apply with us. That doesn't just apply with the information we are providing you guys. The communication applies across the spectrum from the top down and from the down up, from the user perspective on up to Transcom, and from Transcom down to the people who are actually experiencing these moves and everybody in between. So it's really important, and I hope everybody who's watching really hears me when I say that the more information that military families like ours have, the better that we are going to be off, the easier it's going to be to get our service member off to the mission, the more economic security that our military families will be able to have so that we don't come out of pocket as long as we know about what's going to happen before it happens. Communication is key, and I highly suggest to all involved in the PCS process that you absolutely funnel that from the top down and then back up. I'm sorry, I'm off my pedestal now. I'm done. The end.
No, all good. And the communication piece is something that we talk to Transcom in the industry regularly about. I just had a meeting with Dan earlier this week where I think I took a good 10 minutes talking about communication and how important that is, and how it's not just, even if we contact somebody and they don't necessarily have the answer we need, at least them picking up the phone, hearing our questions, saying, let me find out and get back to you, goes a long way, rather than just feeling like somebody ghosted us or is ignoring us because they know they don't have the answer. Just a little communication can go a long way. And so it's really great to hear when our industry partners say, hey, we're working on this, and we do know that it's a big issue, to know that, they are hearing us, they are listening, they are, acknowledging it and addressing it as well. So just, they hear it a lot from me, so I'm like a broken record sometimes, but communication is definitely a big thing. And so it's great to hear that, they're acknowledging it and addressing it for us.
Yep, the members of our association. Yeah. Go ahead.
It is a big thing, but I also I don't want to lump everybody together, right? And that's what I think is easy to do sometimes in the moving world, is if I'm in an office, even as a gypso or someplace, and I take 100 phone calls, that's a lot of phone calls about a lot of problems. Yeah. There's 8,000 or 9,000 shipments going out every week. So, there are thousands of shipments where people are doing great work and making it happen for people, and communicating right, and packing it right, and delivering it on time, and all those kind of things. It's just, we're operating on the outer levels here, but as big as DoD is, those outer levels, it could be hundreds and hundreds of shipments, and that's why it can be problematic.
Right. So I think we've got one more last question here. I think we kind of answered it a little bit inadvertently with some other questions, but I want to make sure that our viewers really know the answer to this. So going back to talking about PPMs, finding a company, say we found a company, we use them, we're having issues with that PPM company that we hired. Is there a place to report them, or what can the family do to kind of get some resolution there?
But there's a couple of things. Again, going back to that Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, that's the entity that oversees household good moving interstate in the United States. And they've got a big stick, licensure and the potential loss of licensure. So again, the Protect Your Move website on that Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, I get it all, it is one place to go to alert them if you're having problems. If it gets to the point where somebody's holding you hostage, there is a website, Move Rescue, and it's really operated through one of the large van lines, United Van Lines and Mayflower Van Lines has a holding company over top of them called Unigroup. And Unigroup has started this service that's called Move Rescue. And they can also assist someone who is in need of assistance as well. And they're a pretty good resource. I'd offer IAM as a resource as well. If it would be one of our members, which I doubt it would be, then we've got a hammer there for that. But again, we can make phone calls. We know people. We can answer some questions that people may have, and we've had a lot of outreach from military services, the headquarter level, the GIPSO level, who have said we've had Airman Jones who's encountered a problem. You know, what can we do to help this? Who are these people? And we've done a lot of research to be able to help them and give them information that they can utilize to then push forward. So there are resources out there. And again, if you need help, I'm an Army brat, Dan's former service member. You know, there's no one that we want to help more than a military family.
That's good to know that we have those resources available. And I didn't even know about Move Rescue. Going to definitely go. We'll get that link dropped below into the comments for everybody to definitely go and check out if you are looking to do a PPM. But it's good to know that there are those resources out there, because I feel like sometimes we have this bad move when we hire this PPM company, and it's, you know, what do we do besides hiring a lawyer to go after them and to pay them more money just to get our stuff kind of deal. So it's nice to know there are resources and places we can go to report these issues and to get help to get through this entire process then.
And again, it depends on what kind of move you've got. If you've got an intra-state move, I mean, within the state, there are organizations within different states, moving associations, licensure groups that can help you in those states. Now, it has, you know, I can't give you every single one now, but you know, in California, there's a very robust group there that does the licensure and ensuring that consumers are protected. And you know, so there are definitely outlets that you can go to that can assist you when you encounter a problem.
And, you know, I just want to say that I'm sure that we're going to get a heck of a lot more questions, comments, and concerns, because we have a huge OCONUS following, and I'm so certain that they have some questions. We keep in touch with Chuck and Dan because they're not getting rid of us now, because that's a thing. But I just wanted to go ahead and, you know, we're gonna wrap up. Every question, comment, or concern that you left, we will be addressing. All of the things that we talked about today, all of the links, they are dropped. If they haven't already been, they will be dropped into the comment section, but I believe they all are. So we're going to go ahead and do this wheel of names real quick. Gentlemen, are you ready?
Do it. Spin it.
All right. All right. Here, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I mercifully closed all of my tabs so nobody had to see the inside of MJ's brain. All right, here we go. Everybody see?
See it.
All right, we're giving away 2 Hope Design Limited necklaces today. And the first one goes to Jared Knight, who is one of our spouse sponsors. So I'm actually going to modify that to perhaps a pair of cufflinks for Jared.
Congratulations, Jared.
Hope Design does that too. Congrats, Jared, and I'll be in touch. The next up is...
Someday we will have a real drum roll.
I see Andrea Gergen on your wheel, and I know Andrea. She's a former Navy civilian that is an amazing person. You should have given it to her. Golly.
Oh, really? Oh, really? But that's okay, because Andrea is going to keep watching every week, and Andrea is commenting that she had some pretty good knowledge coming through, from what I understand. Yeah. So congratulations to Gina. Gina, you get a Hope Design necklace. We're going to be in touch with you. Yes, we will. I believe we have your information, but if not, go ahead and shoot an email or a Facebook message to the PCS Grades Facebook page so that I can get your information and go ahead and shoot that over to you. And Jared, of course, we're in touch. I am his spouse sponsor lead. He is a spouse sponsor out of San Diego, California. And shout out all day. So I know his information already. Well, thank you so much, gentlemen. Of course, everyone, I want you to know that these are some of our favorite guests and they will be on again. These are the people that correspond and actually help work with the people who are moving your stuff. So these are the people we want to talk to, right? And the insight that you give them is also helpful, just as much as the answers that they give you. So Chuck, Dan, thank you so much again for being guests with us today on our special episode of PCS Impact Q&A. Megan, as always, our resident PCS reform advocate, AKA always, always, always so happy to have you with me. I don't know what I would do without her people. But Megan, until next time.
This too shall PCS.
Bye, everybody.